Hello and welcome to the National Leadership Briefing. Thank you for joining us today. We are excited to have you here with us. There are so many new people on the briefing today. Welcome to you all, and thank you to everyone who invited someone else to join us today, because you know that the way that we actually grow the influence that we have here on the briefing is by inviting other people to join us as well and to rally around the same things that we all share in common, which of course is the 4 pillars, and we'll talk about that today. But thank you for joining us today. Just so you're aware, every single time I finish with a briefing at the end of each month, I am excited, looking forward to the next one. Well, this one has been just one I just have not been able to wait for. I was so excited to actually be able to come here today and share with you what we're going to share, because today is the day we launch Operation Engage. Operation Engage is that opportunity that I was telling you about, where we can maximize our influence within a political process that's coming up in front of us right now. So we're going to do that later on. But first, I want to just remind you of a couple of things. As excited as I am here today to be with you, there is a seriousness about this moment in time that we're living in. And I want you to understand the gravity of the situation. There is a situation happening in culture and society, politics and government out there, where there's a question mark being put behind the suggestion that you and I even have a right to participate in society with the views that we have. And I want to tell you something that's really interesting about that is that this is only a view that is held by a very few people, but they are very vocal. And they are executing, it's not a general strategy, it is a political strategy. So we're going to talk about that today, and I want you to be aware of it, because as much fun as we have on the briefing, I always want these briefings to be entertaining. I always want these briefings to be something that's not a grueling 1 hour of your time. But today, it's a little bit more serious than usual. And it's been serious these days. And I want you to grab a hold of that fact. We've got to pay attention to what's happening around us, and especially in the realm of politics right now. We are under siege. We are a people that are actually being in the process of being drummed out of the public square. And if we don't acknowledge the seriousness of that, as well, we're all having a great time getting together, then I'm afraid that we're going to miss the importance of us actually taking action on the road ahead. So the seriousness I want to stress with you today, but I also want you to enjoy our time together. So thank you so much for being here. But let's start out first off with reminding all the new people that are on the call today as to what we rally around here on the National Leadership Briefing. For those of you who joined us before, you know that in the fall of 2016, a series of surveys went out across the nation to talk to people, centers of influence, people within the churches of Canada, people that were sitting in the pews. Parents were receiving them. Many people in the faith community received these surveys and were asked questions about what they felt were the priorities that we needed to focus on moving forward. We asked them what was important to them in their communities. We asked them about the things that we should be supporting and the things that we should be rejecting in the way of ideas out there. Well, this is why it's so important to know where we've come from, is because out of those surveys was gathered a tremendous amount of data on the issues of the day. Now, let me give you just an example of some of the feedback that we got. We had responses from people that expressed concerns about human trafficking that was going on in Canada, prostitution laws that were being discussed as being changed, pornography that was available to kids, euthanasia legislation that was coming forward, marijuana laws that were being discussed, abortion legislation, polyamorous relationships were starting to be talked about more and more, radical sex education, freedom of religion was under siege, child protection, gender theory, debt, and taxation were just a few of the things that were being mentioned as we got this feedback from the people that we surveyed. But what was interesting to note was when you looked at all of this information and the data that was collected, all of these expressions of concern could be reduced down into 4 silos, or what have come to be known as pillars. And that's what I want to share with you today, because that's what we rally around here on the National Leadership Briefing. We set aside everything that can divide us. We set aside all of our denominational differences, all of our different political views, all of our different things that could possibly distract us from the things that we unify around. And these are the 4 pillars that we rally around here on the National Leadership Briefing. First, we rally around a common desire and belief that parents have the right to raise their children the way they want. We believe that here on the National Leadership Briefing, that parents in Canada should have the right to raise their children in the same faith tradition, with the same values. They should be able to pass on the things that were passed on to them by their parents freely and without interference from government. So that's the first pillar, that parents should have the right to raise their children the way they want. The second pillar that we rally around on the National Leadership Briefing is that those we elect to serve us in civil government must respect and defend our right of belief and freedom of religion. And that's for all Canadians, that the people that we actually put in the legislatures and in the House of Commons, they must respect our right of belief and defend it, more importantly, when it's under siege or under attack. We don't want another politician being elected to hold a seat in the House of Commons that refuses to stand up against the barrage of attacks that are coming to people of faith in Canada right now. So they must respect and defend our right of belief and freedom of religion. That's the second pillar. Now, the third pillar that we rally around here on the National Leadership Briefing is that the laws and policies that are passed by those elected representatives must provide for the safety and security of the citizens, especially the vulnerable among us. It's important to note that, because sometimes, especially lately, politicians have been passing laws and they've been actually not taking into consideration the negative health consequences that those laws will have on the citizens. And even worse, they've been passing very serious laws that have actually put people in harm's way. So at the very least, at the very minimum, the very first box that all legislative proposals and all policy must check is the box that holds high the responsibility to keep vulnerable people within our community safe. That's the third pillar. And the fourth pillar that we rally around here on the National Leadership Briefing is that it is inappropriate for civil government to heap debt upon the backs of our children and future generations. So spending money on us, calling it an investment in our children's future, when really what it is, it's excessive taxation that's going to be placed on the backs of our kids when they're born and as they go through their young adult lives. That's inappropriate. That flat out, that is not fiscal policy that we support here on the National Leadership Briefing. So those are the 4 pillars. That first, that parents have the right to raise their children the way they want. Second, that those we elect to serve us in civil government must respect and defend our right of belief and freedom of religion. Number 3, that the laws and policies of civil government must provide for the safety and security of the citizens, especially the vulnerable among us. And number 4, that it is inappropriate to heap debt upon the backs of our children and future generations. Now, I want you to understand something about these 4 pillars. They came from you. They're your pillars. They're the things that you believe. Now, there's a movement out there in Canada right now, and again, they definitely aren't the majority. They are the vocal minority that believe that your ideas and the things that you hold up as priorities do not have a place. But I can tell you that in our society and in Canada, they do. You're a citizen, you're a constituent, you're a member of the community, you have elected representatives. Those are your ideas, and you don't have to justify them, qualify them. They don't even, you know what? An idea doesn't even have to be a good idea to be considered among the mix of ideas that are out there in the government and political landscape. That's the truth of the matter. As citizens, we have the right to put forward ideas. These are the things that we believe in. That is good enough for us. That should be good enough for our elected representatives. Now, the reason why I want to stress that point is that as we move forward today, we're going to be talking about authority briefly in the boardroom before we roll out the new Operation Engage leadership election platform for the Conservative Party of Canada that I was telling you about last month. But I want to make sure that we're clear on that before we move forward, is that as we listen to the grumblings of the vocal minority, that we hold firm in our hearts and in our heads that our ideas have a place that is legitimate among the mix of ideas that are out there. Now, nobody here on the National Leadership Briefing has ever promoted the fact that our ideas should be dominant over anyone else's, because quite frankly, we're not in charge. But we have said that that our ideas have a right to be held up against the other ideas that are out there and considered in the mix of them out there. So that's what we're doing today. We're going to raise some ideas. We're going to put forward some suggestions for consideration in a conversation that's happening within a political party here in Canada, and that's the Conservative Party of Canada. And they're engaging in the leadership race, so they're going to be picking a new leader within that party, and our ideas have a right to be a part of that process. So we're going to talk about that right after we do some very brief training in the boardroom regarding authority, just to remind ourselves about the authorities that we do possess. But then we're going to go right into launching the platform, which I know you're excited about hearing today. So good. I'm glad that we're off to a good start today. Let's get going. We're going to move over into the boardroom right after this short video, and I'm looking forward to serving you there. Talk to you shortly. Bye for now. Okay, it's good to be in the boardroom with you once again. Now, as I mentioned at my desk there, we definitely need to go over this part of the briefing today, especially when we've got so many new people joining us on the briefing, and they definitely want to be on the same page as us when it comes to something as important as authority. So we're going to talk about authority, but I'm going to just review quickly this teaching template that we use on the briefing for those of us that are just new today. So if you're looking at this for the first time, what you're seeing here is you're seeing that in society here in Canada, we have different spheres of authority or different governments that exist. We have self-government, which is you. You are, as an individual, a government unto yourself. You have the authority within your sphere of authority. You have authority to make decisions about how you live your life and the things that you do every day, what you eat, what you do for exercise, where you work. All of these decisions are yours to make. And you have that authority up to a jurisdictional limit. So this is your limit of authority identified by the black line. Now, families also are a government unto themselves, and they have a sphere of authority as well. If you're like me, as I've mentioned before many times, if you're like me, when I grew up, there were the rules that existed outside of our house, and there were the rules that existed inside of our house. And my father and my mother made the rules inside the house, and they were often a little bit different than the ones outside, but they had the authority to do that within their sphere of authority as they raised our family. There is also the church in Canada, people of faith that gather together in groups and join churches. That is a sphere of authority or a government unto itself. And then finally, of course, the one that we're most familiar with is civil government in our society and the authority that they have. Now, what we teach on the National Leadership Briefing is that it's critical as citizens of Canada that we acknowledge that civil government is unique among all of the other forms of government in Canada. Civil government is unique because of two things. The two things that makes them unique is, one, they have the power to legislate and they have the power to tax. And that power makes them unusually powerful or exceptionally powerful in relation to the other governments. Now, let's take a look at that power for a second so that we understand where it comes from. In our society, citizens gather together in tribes. So these are tribes of people, different groups here. They gather together in tribes, and they gather together in what's called a political process. They together share their ideas, come together on a kind of a common understanding as what they believe in, and they form political parties or groups around their ideas, and then they raise up leaders, then that they move into civil government to represent those views and values. That's what happens. So we have a transference of individuals. Their individual authority is combined, and then it is transferred or lent to people that will go into civil government and represent their views and values. Now, again, what you have to realize is that when you, as an individual citizen, gather together a bunch of other citizens and you use your combined authority to then transfer it to individuals that are a part of government, you, in essence, supersize their authority, so they have an unusually larger amount of authority as individuals. And you can see that, I mean, when you take a look at the office of the Prime Minister or the office of the Premier of every province, they have exceptional authority above the individual to make decisions. But you have to do that. You have to give them that authority, because the intention is that they will make decisions that are for the betterment of all of society and for the betterment of the individuals, families, and the church. These other spheres or these other governments should prosper and be secure under the civil government's direction and what they decide to implement in the way of policies. However, you and I both know that the only thing that makes things imperfect when it comes to structures like government is that they're made up of people. And people oftentimes lose their way and they get distracted, and we'll give them the benefit of the doubt and use words like that. We won't use words like corruption, or they're using a different agendas, but we'll just say that they often lose their way and they forget that they should be operating within their own sphere of authority. And we've seen that over and over again, how government, when they forget, they use the powers that they have to legislate and to tax, and they actually impose themselves on the authority, on the sphere of influence and the sphere of authority that other individuals have, that families have, and that the church has. Let me give you some examples. Is that the family, if you take a look at this tug of war that's going on right now between civil government and the family, it's civil government pitting their authority against the authority of parents. So we talk about that as the first pillar, that parents have the right to raise their children the way they want. So parents have to exercise their authority to restrain government, to push government back to within their appropriate sphere of authority that has been granted them under the Constitution and under our charter. So we have to push back on that. So this is important for us to realize as we're talking about when we come together and rally around the four pillars. We're not just all jumping around, flying flags and saying parents have the right to this, and civil government must respect and defend and all these other things. No, we've created a group of people that has come together sharing these core beliefs with the desire to restrain civil government within their appropriate sphere of authority. We're pushing back civil government to protect the rights of the individual, to protect the sovereignty of the family government, and the church here in Canada to operate, to keep free speech rights, the right of gathering together, our conscience rights. All of these things government needs to be restrained, because they have a tendency to mutate and expand and impose themselves on us. Well, let me tell you something that I've learned over 20 years of doing this, is that civil government does not like being restrained at all. So it's important that as we restrain civil government and they resist that restraint, that we are absolutely certain as to what it is that we are doing and with what authority we're doing it. So that's why we're going to talk just for a second about authority and remind you about your authorities. Okay, first authority that you as an individual have is you have, I'll just put a C there, you have citizen authority. You are a citizen of Canada that is equal to all other citizens of Canada, and you have rights that are bestowed on you to participate in electoral processes and to express your views and to stand up and be heard. We also have these documents like the Charter of Rights and Freedoms that outline your rights as a citizen to freedom of conscience and religion and right of belief. All of these things are your citizen rights and give you authority when you are now restraining civil government with the pillars and the things that you believe. The second thing you have is another C, and that's constituent authority. Now, I want to remind you about this because people oftentimes, they forget that this is your authority and it's important. I'm holding up this map. Now, this is just a tiny little map of a little area that's known as Nanaimo Ladysmith. It's in Nanaimo on Vancouver Island. And Nanaimo Ladysmith is a constituency or an electoral district of Canada. There's 338 of these districts. And I want to remind you that everybody that lives in Canada lives inside of an electoral district. And because they are a constituent and reside within an electoral district, you have something called constituent authority. And what that is that means that you can go to your local representative, the representative that has been elected in that district, and you can say, I live in your riding and I would like to share my views and values with you. I would like to tell you about me. I would like to tell you about all the things that I believe in so that you understand what I want. Now, if you get enough people in a riding, obviously, that have the same belief, then that person gets elected. That will likely share your views. They'll share your views on it. But there's so many different competing ideas out there. So as a constituent, I just want to recognize first off, we have the right to be heard by our elected representatives. Very important. That's constituent authority. Now, the next one here, I'm going to put a K down there because that's called kingdom authority. Now, we as people of faith, we actually have kingdom authority, but I'm not going to teach, I never teach about that here on the National Leadership Briefing, but instead I challenge the pastors and I challenge the church leaders. And I say to you as parents, I say, take this kingdom authority and teach it to the people that you serve. Teach it to your kids. Teach it to the people in the pews, because using your kingdom authority is actually, I think, probably one of the best things you can do. But again, I'm not going to teach it here now. I'm just going to tell you about it and encourage you to teach it to others. And then finally, the last authority, which is the one that we're going to be talking about here today, is political party authority. Now, this isn't like the other authorities. This isn't like the other three. This is the only authority that is completely 100% optional that you can buy. You can actually purchase that extra authority to actually advance your ideas and advance your beliefs in society. And political party authority just simply means that as a citizen of Canada and as a person who resides within a constituency and as a person who just wants to express themselves and be heard, you can spend $15 or whatever it is, if it's $20 in another party, but in this particular party, it's $15, and you can buy a political party membership and you can purchase extra authority that you can then exercise in the decisions of how that party operates. For example, you can stand up at a policy convention and you can raise your hand and vote on the policies of a party if you want. Or like the one that we're dealing with now within the Conservative Party of Canada, you can actually buy a membership and you can decide who will lead that party. Now, you might say to yourself, well, Doug, you know what? I'm not a political guy and I don't like that. Politics is dirty and all of that other stuff. I've heard it all, believe me, over 20 years. But before you say no to purchasing extra authority for $15, I always want to remind you that while you're saying no, Other people that do not share your views and values are saying yes. And they're reaching into their pocket and they're pulling out the $15 and they're marching in there with their ballots, and they are going to elect someone that will represent their views and values. So before you say no, say, maybe I better consider that, because I do want to consider what the options are, and I do want to have a say in that process. Now, I'm just going to finish with this piece of authority training, just with this one reminder. Why, Doug? Why would you do any or all of this? Why would you exercise political party authority? Why do I care who is going to be the leader of this political party? Well, I want you to be interested in the leader of all political parties, because especially ones who could become the Prime Minister of Canada, because that's a key role in deciding and making decisions about the care of your neighbor. And I'm going to remind you of this, is that it's not about you. It's not about me. It's about the decisions that civil government makes that is either going to positively or negatively impact the lives of our neighbor. And we are called to care about our neighbor. So I want to remind you about the fact that if somebody is going to decide on the policies of government, and you have the option of deciding who that person is, you have definitely an interest in that as a person of faith here in Canada. So I encourage you to just stay tuned here, because we are going to launch right now. It's coming up. I'm going to pull this sign down here in a second. We're going to release something here today that is going to be a pathway to showing you how you can have a maximum amount of influence on who is going to be the next leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. Now, I want to remind you, we're a nonpartisan organization here, National Leadership Briefing. This is just the opportunity before us now. I want you to be looking for opportunities in all political parties to maximize your influence. But right now, right here today, we're talking about the Conservative Party of Canada and the leadership election that's coming up. So let's have a look at it. I'm going to show you this right now. This is the announcement of Operation Engage. We made that announcement last briefing, and I want to tell you about what this is all about here. Right now in Canada, like I say, we're going to have a conversation about who's going to be the next leader of a political party. Well, we're launching Operation Engage because we have goals and objectives that we want to achieve as part of us participating in that process. Let's look at them real quickly here. The first goal of Operation Engage is to open a dialogue within that political party so that we can actually participate. Now, you might say, Doug, well, that's kind of a pretty basic first step, but believe me, there are individuals out there that don't even want to dialogue with us right now. So that is why it is a goal of its own, that we just want to say, hey, we're here. We're members of the party. We've actually purchased that additional $15 extra authority. We want to participate in the process. And so do you mind if we have a conversation? You got to ask permission. Theoretically, right? So you say, I want to have a conversation, so I want to open up a dialogue. The second thing is while we're talking, I want to thank you, because I'd like you to believe that I'm free to express my views and to advance our platform priorities within the conversation. In other words, there's going to be all sorts of people standing up here sharing their ideas, and I just want to share my ideas as part of the mix, if that's okay. The third goal of Operation Engage is to identify between what you want and what we're talking about here. We want to identify the common ground that's between us. It's fair. We'll have a conversation, identify the common ground. And then number 4 is we're going to move forward united with a common goal and purpose. So again, really quickly, open a dialogue, share our ideas, identify the common ground, and move forward united. That is the goal of Operation Engage. You know what it doesn't say up here? It doesn't say kicking everybody around, treating them poorly, dismissing their ideas, and trying to take over the party. That's not what it says up here. What it says is open a dialogue, advance our ideas, find common ground, and move forward united. And that's a very specific reason for that, is because we have no right to run in there and just take over. Nobody said anywhere in any church I ever sat in, taught by any pastor, that we should be just taking over everything. So these are our goals of Operation Engage. And we're going to achieve this goal in part through using technology and a website that I'm going to show you right now. And then I'm going to show you the platform priorities. But let's show you where they're going to be housed first. And here is introducing right now, for the first time that you're going to see it here, the new website for Operation Engage and where it's going to be housed. Here it is right now. Well, there you go, conservativeupdate.com. You're going to want to be remembering that, because everything that we talked about here today and everything I'm about to share with you is going to be housed on that website. The National Leadership Briefing will continue to have the briefings and will continue to teach people how to advance their ideas and the things that they believe within their spheres of authority and within their spheres of influence. But we have a very special place that has been established, and that's at conservativeupdate.com, to house our activities over the course of this leadership election competition or contest that's going on within the Conservative Party of Canada. And remember, let's just remind ourselves of what we just talked about. If you have a membership within that party, the minute you buy that membership for $15, you are a member that is equal to every other member in that party. Now, the reason why I say that is because I've been around for 20 years. Matter of fact, I've been in the party since day one. And even before, I was a part of a national council, a governing body of a political party that actually helped merge the parties together to form the Conservative Party of Canada. And I've done all sorts of things since then. I've been a campaign manager. I've been at every policy convention. I have brought people into the party. I've been supported different candidates. I've done lots of stuff over the years, but you want to know something? The minute you join the party, you and I we have the same level of authority. So everybody within the party, they're all equal. And what you get to do is you get to take your membership and you get to help make some decisions about what goes on in that party moving forward. And of course, we're looking at the leadership election process that's happening right now. So let's get right into it. And let me share with you the election campaign strategy that we're launching here today with Operation Engage. Okay, so let's review what's happening here within the Conservative Party of Canada. And that's why I've got a line around this, is because we want to be clear about it. This is happening within the political party. Now, you're going to hear lots of people chiming in the weeks and the months ahead from outside of the party, you know, like the Evan Solomons of the world and the Rosemary Barton of the world, and all of these different people that are media and all of these, and they're not necessarily inside the party. So we want to make sure that we're screening out what we're hearing outside of the party, because this is what's happening inside the party. It's kind of like, think about it as your own family. Like if you're going to have a family conversation about something that's happening in your family, how about if your neighbor knocked on your front door and said, hey, I just want to let you know, this is my idea about that, and you should really get rid of that and do this. Your neighbor has no standing inside of your house talking about family issues. Well, that's what's happening inside the Conservative Party of Canada. We are all getting together inside of the family, and we're having a family conversation about who is going to lead the party. Now, we appreciate Evan Solomon's interest in all of this and the Rosemary Bartons of the world, but you know what? They have no standing, and we do not have to let them distract us from the conversation we're having inside the party. So I say that because you will see what happens if you haven't seen it already about people chiming in, okay? So we've got inside the Conservative Party of Canada, we're having a family conversation about who's gonna lead, and what's happening is you're starting to see all of these different candidates that are gonna line up, and they're gonna be saying to us, pick me, pick me, pick me, and these are the reasons why. And they're gonna start laying out all of their ideas. Each of them are going to come with some great ideas. And I tell you, this is the great thing about the Conservative Party of Canada is that it's such a big, broad group of people that you're going to get this big, broad mix of ideas that are going to be talked about and discussed. It's fantastic because as much as you might hear, you know, yeah, you hear this sometimes, you go, well, we got to get rid of that guy and that guy isn't welcome here and they're not welcome here. You know what? That's just the very few. There is a very few number of people that, yes, they are in very vocal positions that will try and drum us out or try and keep us quiet. But the vast majority of people are really open-minded people that are open to having conversations about the things that are important to people. And they're willing to have that conversation within the context of this election process. So I'm going to assume that of all of the leaders that are all of these contestants, that they're going to be those kinds of people, because I believe that's representative of the vast majority of the party. So all of these candidates are lining up. Okay, now the old way is, the way we used to do politics and the way we're used to doing politics is, they all line up and we sit back and we look at the list and we kind of evaluate, you know, okay, well, what's the person that best represents my views and values? What's the person that's willing to represent my views and values is actually even a bigger question these days, but we take a look at the list of people out there. Well, we're going to do it a little bit different this time because we have our own ideas that maybe are not going to be represented in the mix of the ideas that these candidates are going to be putting forward. So here's the plan, is Operation Engage with the goals and objectives. Remember the goal. The goals are, there's 4 of them. First, to open a dialogue with these candidates. Second, to advance our ideas as part of the mix, our leadership election priority platform, our platform priorities, pardon me. Third is to identify the common ground between us and to move forward united in common purpose. That is the goal of what we're doing here. So how we're going to achieve that is that we're going to give great respect to all of these candidates that are there. However, we're going to launch this. The Common Ground platform. That's what we're launching on the conservativeupdate.com website that you're going to have access to today. So the Common Ground platform, what is it? Well, it is a representation of what you've been telling me for the last 3 years that I've been talking to you about what's important to you. I told you that the 4 pillars came from you. They're your ideas: parental authority, the right of belief and freedom of religion, the importance of passing laws that protect the vulnerable, and the necessity to start relieving the debt of the burden of debt that's been placed on the backs of our children. These ideas are represented within this Common Ground platform that we are releasing today, and you are going to be able to review the platform. And then you're going to be able to check a box to say, you know what? That is a representation of the things I believe in. And you're going to be able to say with your signature that you support these ideas. Now, you're obviously going to have people that you like over here as well. You're going to have candidates that you like, but maybe some of these ideas that you support aren't going to be represented over here. So what we're going to do is we're going to present these ideas over here and try and share it with enough people that share our views and values so that they check enough boxes over here to catch the attention of some of these candidates over there. Believe me, if you've got a political party candidate over here that wants to be the leader of the party, and he's got maybe, or she's got maybe 25 or 30,000 votes within the party, and all of a sudden there's 50 or 60,000 people over here that are going, hey, wait a second, I kind of like these ideas. this individual is going to take an interest in what you're talking about over here. So that is the common ground platform that we are launching as an expression of what you've told me are your platform priorities. Now remember, it's to open a dialogue. So before I open this, because I'm about to actually pick up this document here, and I'm going to share 4 of the platform priorities with you. Now, we don't have time to share them all today, but I'm going to share 4 of them with you. And then I'm going to remind you though, first, is that this is to open a dialogue. If something in here is kind of interesting to one of these candidates and they want to have a conversation about it, then we are going to want to hear from them. We're going to want to hear back from them. And that's why I don't want anybody getting all dug in on this wording there or that wording there, because I'm doing my best to actually echo back to you what you've been telling me is important. Let me give you an example. We're going to start here. The way the platform is laid out in the table of contents that you're going to see it on the website. You're going to see that there are platform planks, individual policy and legislative proposals for each of the 4 pillars. So they're a representation of the first pillar with parental authority, the second one, right of belief and freedom of religion, the third is protecting the vulnerable. You're going to see all that laid out in the platform planks. But you're also going to want them to then, these candidates, to be able to express or to share their responses after seeing this. So what we've got on that website is we've got a special page that's set up where each of the candidates is going to be able to do 2 things. One is they're going to be able to review what I'm about to share with you in part, and they're going to be able to give you a 3-minute video on each of the planks. So as I'm reviewing each of these planks with you and giving you examples from each of the policies, I want you to imagine that there's a candidate out there that is going to be seeing this and reading the same thing, and then they're going to be able to respond directly to you with a 3-minute video. So that's the first thing that you're going to be able to see on this website, conservativeupdate.com. The second thing that you're going to be able to see is we're going to invite all the candidates to take each of these platform planks and actually provide us with a PDF of their writing, the written word that identifies any commitment statements that they're willing to make related to that policy platform position. So in other words, if this person, this candidate here likes it, they might do a video that says, hey, I just want to let you know I fully support that. I'm excited about that. I want to advance that idea. And that's the video. But then in writing, they're going to be able to actually put it down in writing and say, I am committing to advancing this if elected leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. So instead of asking for promises, well, you know, the National Leadership Briefing, we always teach you to ask for commitment statements, and that's what we're asking them to do as well. And that'll be on the website, and you will be able to go back and see that anytime. So let's get into it. I want to share one of these with you. Let's get into it. Let's start with pillar number 1. Okay? Now remember, they're going to be able to see this, and they're going to be they're going to be able to hear from you that this is a priority of yours. So first pillar is, of course, that parents have the right to raise their children the way they want. So as parents in Canada, it says here, and this will be right on the website, we all have this in common as parents of Canada. We want the very best for our children. We also know and love our children in a way that civil government could never replicate. That is why we believe it's important that civil government respects parents and their right to raise their children the way they want. As an expression of our shared view within the party, we're reaching out to our friends in the Conservative Party of Canada. Our shared view, as an expression of our shared view that parents have this right to raise their children the way they want, we seek a commitment from CPC leadership candidates to support the introduction of a Parent's Bill of Rights, or what could be known as the Parental Authority Protection Act. And the Parental Authority Protection Act, or this Bill of Rights that we're talking about, would protect a parent's right to pass on their religion to their children, to instill their values in their children, to choose their children's school and the education pathway for their children, and to also stay in control of the health decisions of their children. And finally, to retain the authority to decide what materials are placed in front of their children and who has access to their children. So this is a Parent's Bill of Rights that has some detail on it on the website that you're going to be able to go and have a look at. And also, all of these candidates are also going to have an opportunity to let you know what they think of that idea. Okay? Let's go to the second pillar. As I say, I don't have time to go through them all, but there's other ideas on there as well. The second pillar is, of course, that those we elect to serve us in civil government must respect and defend our right of belief and freedom of religion. That's kind of actually, that's a I mean, if you can't check that box as a leadership candidate that you're going to respect and defend our right of belief, you know what? I don't think you're going to get much support from the faith community that I've been serving for the last 15, 20 years, okay? So here it is right now. Let me take a look at it here. In recent years, members of parliament have had many opportunities to stand unified in defense of the charter rights of Canadians, but have unfortunately failed to do so. During that same period of time, many parliamentarians have supported their use of Section 1 charter authority to pass laws that unreasonably restrict our rights as Canadians. In other words, you have to go back maybe to a national leadership briefing from before, but we have talked about Section 1 charter privilege that's given lawmakers to reasonably limit the rights of Canadians. But there has been some unreasonable limitations placed on Canadians that you can actually do a little bit more research on. But so one example is the recent passing of euthanasia laws here in Canada. Parliament had the opportunity to show leadership and stand in defense of the conscience rights of medical professionals when that law was passed. However, instead, they chose to leave it to provincial government leaders to protect the conscience rights of medical professionals who were not able to participate because of their deeply held religious beliefs. And I remember that conversation because I sat down in front of parliamentarians at the time at the federal level, and I said, you need to protect the conscience rights of medical professionals when it comes to euthanasia. And they said, don't worry about it. The province will take care of that. And that didn't happen, and it hasn't happened yet. So this failure of leadership has been a great concern to many Canadians. So we ask our friends in the Conservative Party and the CPC leadership election candidates to commit now to introducing and supporting a legislative proposal that would provide for the comprehensive conscience rights of medical professionals in Canada. So we need those conscience rights protected. Now, that policy, there was a policy about that was passed at convention with a very large majority. So that is an example of something we would like to hear from all of the candidates on regarding our second pillar views on that issue. Pillar number 3, let's take a look at that. Vulnerable persons. And I'm not going to read this because we're running out of time and I want to keep to the proper time. But you know what? Civil government only has one primary responsibility. They have the primary responsibility. They have lots of different responsibilities, but one is primary, and that is to provide for the safety and security of the citizens. That is where the third pillar came from, was an expectation that the laws and policies that they passed would support that primary responsibility of government. However, government has failed to protect the vulnerable among us because they have done things like passing euthanasia laws, legalizing marijuana, and doing these types of things without the proper protections in place. They have placed vulnerable people at risk. And I'm going to show you a brief video right now that will illustrate very clearly what I'm talking about. Watch this.
If I had to go ahead and do what the doctors wanted me to do, I wouldn't have had her.
What was that?
Well, they wanted me to do assisted suicide death on her.
This is your story. You said a couple of things on the CBC News story. I remember they said, did you want to die? And what did you say?
I don't know. I don't want to go.
She got sick here at home. We got the ambulance. When we got her to the hospital, she was having seizures. They had to give her medication, take her heart rate down. Her heart rate was quite up, very high, top 170. This doctor that was seeing her first, and he came in and he told me that her kidney wasn't in the right spot. He told me the lower parts of her lungs had collapsed, so they admitted her. And the next day, when he came in, he took me out in the hallway and he just stood me up against the wall and he told me about assisted suicide death was legal in Canada. And I said, well, he asked, did I know? And I said, no. And then he said, he was all for it. And I said, well, that was your choice. And I told him I wasn't interested in anything to do with assisted suicide death. And he told me, he said, I was being selfish and he wanted to assist me in doing this. And I said, I'm not interested. I more or less walked away from her. She heard everything.
Yeah.
And
You heard what the doctor said?
Yeah.
How did that make you feel?
Not feeling good.
like not once did she ever say to them, I want to end my life. Not once.
You said they talked about it a lot. Did they talk about it a lot with you?
Yeah.
And this doctor came in and next day after he told me about the assisted suicide death and stuck his face down in hers and said, do you know how sick you are? And I'm just like, and when I got his eyes contact, I went my eyes like that to get out in the hallway, and I told him, don't you ever pull something like that again.
So at that time, were you worried that Candace was going to die?
They had us told me that she was dying. I believed them. They were the doctors, and she was so sick. So, but I told her if she wanted to go, it was good. She could go. But she didn't. She don't cry, honey. But she didn't want me to be alone. Don't cry. It's all done now. It's over. We just don't want it to happen to anybody else, hey?
No.
Don't want another family to go through this.
You know, as Christians here in Canada, as people of faith who serve at street level, I mean, we have so many people, millions of people in Canada that whose ministries operate and serve the most basic needs of people. We see tragedy over and over and over again. Vulnerable people that are being harmed. But when you see government make single decisions that place so many vulnerable people in harm's way, that add to the tragedy that's happening at street level, we're compelled to speak up. We're absolutely compelled to speak up. Right now in Canada, and I'm gonna move on from this in a second here, but this is so important for us to understand, is especially with euthanasia, the government is having a conversation right now about expanding the eligibility of euthanasia to include children and the mentally ill. This is a summary of a report that they're looking at. The report itself is about 900 pages, but this is a summary of a report that's actually been done for parliamentarians, and they're right in the middle of that conversation right now. And if they haven't even got it worked out with the existing laws, and they're talking about expanding euthanasia to include others, then this is going to end badly for our neighbor. And I'm so glad that you, as citizens of Canada, told me that we need this third pillar represented in our platform. And let me tell you what it is that we're proposing. Is we're asking our friends in the Conservative Party of Canada to do the very same thing for vulnerable people that we do for the environment right now. Environmental protection and risk assessments are done all the time. Whenever there's a new piece of legislation or a new policy, we have no trouble at all launching these risk assessments to actually determine to what degree that our environment is going to be placed at risk by this action by government. And we're just asking the same thing for vulnerable persons here in Canada. And we're asking for support from these candidates for something called the Vulnerable Person Protection Act. And that is that it becomes absolutely required, a requirement for any new law or policy, that a risk assessment is done to determine to the degree that vulnerable people within society are going to be placed at increased risk by the implementation of this law. So when marijuana was legalized, for example, they may have gone through all sorts of studies and they might have done all sorts of things, but we're asking them to do one even more. We're asking them to produce for us the assessment of who is at risk now, to what degree they will be at increased risk, and what you consider to be, as government, to be the acceptable losses of vulnerable people for you implementing this new law. And what I mean by this application of government these days of something called acceptable loss theory. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but acceptable loss theory is sort of, it's kind of like a military term that came out of warfare, because what they would do, as an example, is that you have a carpet bombing type mission that's going to roll over top of a munitions factory, and they find out that there's an orphanage right beside the munitions factory. And military leaders needed to decide if the advantage of them achieving their military objective of taking out the munitions factory by carpet bombing it was going to be sufficient. Was there a significant enough military advantage for them to justify the risk that would be placed at the orphans next door to that in case they missed their mark? And that seems to be the theory that governments have taken, is that they seem to be making these determinations behind closed doors, that there is an acceptable number of vulnerable persons that they are willing to lose when implementing laws like euthanasia law. But we're saying that one is too many. One is too many. Vulnerable Persons Protection Act requires government to release publicly the risk assessment as to who is at increased risk and to what degree, and what vulnerable people categories have they looked at. Have they looked at the homeless? Have they looked at the seniors? Have they looked at the shut-in elderly? Have they looked at people with mobility challenges? Have they looked at people that don't necessarily conform to what a doctor might think is sort of your typical functioning human being, as appears tragically to be the case here? So the Vulnerable Persons Protection Act and that third pillar proposal, we're very excited to give them the opportunity to respond to that. Okay, and the fourth one, we're going to go to the fourth pillar, and then we're going to wind it up here because I'm going to tell you what we can do next. The fourth pillar is that it's inappropriate for civil government to heap debt upon the backs of our children and future generations. We do not want our children to be born as bond servants of civil government. We want the yoke of excessive taxation to be removed from them as quickly as possible. So we are proposing that the government actually support the Find For in the First Year campaign. And that quite simply is that we want to hear from candidates to see if they would be willing to, upon taking leadership in the party and immediately forming government, that they immediately ask all departments of government to find 4% in savings in the first year that they're in office, and halt the flow of money we don't have, and start relieving the debt that's on the backs of our children. Find 4% in the first year. Take a look at it. Let us know what you think. We think it's a great idea. It's a great first step. Except there is one caveat on that, and that is that's in all departments except one. And I'm excited to share this with you. The one department that is not going to be impacted, and we do not ask it to be impacted, is Veterans Affairs, because we believe that that veterans in our country need to be provided the services that they need to function and to live and to prosper. And we thank them for what they've done to secure our opportunity to even have this conversation. So Veterans Affairs is exempt in the Find 4% in the first year proposal. There's also an additional part of that. Another thing that was really interesting is that we'd also like to propose something called the Grateful Canadians Monuments Fund. The Grateful Canadian Monuments Fund is actually the ability for Canadians to actually make a contribution to a fund that would establish brand new monuments across the country that could tell all of the stories that have yet to be told of the great sacrifice and the great great heroism that our veterans have actually performed. There are so many untold stories out there, and grateful Canadians want to hear about it. Well, we will seek to provide, and this is we're seeking support from our CPC friends. We're seeking their support for the Grateful Canadian Monuments Fund that would make it a tax-deductible donation. You would be able to donate up to a specified amount to the Grateful Canadian Monuments Fund to build the monuments to recognize all of the great things that the stories that we have yet to tell about our veterans and what they've done for us. And we're pretty excited about that one, and we're so looking forward to hearing from our CPC friends on that in the leadership contest. So these are the kinds of things that you're going to see on the website, conservativeupdate.com. These are the things that we're going to encourage you as a new party member to bring before these candidates. Let's not just wait for them to stumble over the website. If you've got a candidate that you like out there, if you think that that person is the person that we're supposed to be supporting and you're excited about it, go over there and tell them to go to the website, conservativeupdate.com. Share your views with them. Let them know how excited you are about these ideas that are outlined here in this document and on the website. And let them know that we're excited about the opportunity to freely express our ideas with them as part of this process. We're excited that we live in a country where we can express our ideas without fear of retribution, without fear of any sort of an attack coming back on us. We are within a political process that we have every right to be in, and I'm excited to hear from you and of all of the connections that you've made with candidates and your friends to make sure that they register their support for this platform. Because remember, this platform with 5 people supporting it is nowhere near as powerful as if there's 50,000 people supporting it. So have a look at it and share it with your friends. Now, there's something else that I'm going to do to make sure I'm walking this road with you, because I've never, ever asked you to do something alone. I've made the commitment that I'm going to walk this road with you. I'm going to continue to do that here. And that is that we're going to start something called the midweek touch point. Because the time is so tight for us to gather support around this platform and the ideas, I'm going to be doing a weekly midweek touch point where you're going to be able to gather people together in your community and in your sphere of influence, and you're going to be able to direct them to a weekly session with me where I'm going to introduce this idea to them. If we can't wait once a month to just keep touching base, we've got to compress it and do a weekly touch on these issues. And every week I'm going to introduce a brand new one of the platform planks and talk about it. So we're going to have an introduction, talk to them, meet them. I'll encourage them. I'll tell them what they need to do. I'll help them to understand. If they have any questions, they can get back to me between the sessions, and we'll be able to move forward. And let's maximize our influence in this opportunity we have to participate freely as Canadians in a political process that is available to us. So I hope you'll take advantage of that. I thank you so much for your time today, and I'm very excited about the opportunity to serve you on the road ahead. In the meantime, God bless you, God bless your family, and may God continue to bless this great nation of Canada. Bye for now.